What is going on, guys? So today, continuing our week of meta picks for the Tempest Cup, we are going to be looking at a Pokemon that is undoubtedly a staple in many Great League teams, not only just for the Silph Cups, but for any general Great League tournaments that you may be going into. And that Pokemon is none other than Altaria. So Altaria is actually a dragon and flying type Pokemon with a max CP at level 40 with 15 IVs across the board. You actually have 2004 CP. You can actually achieve a 1497 at level 29 with a 0 on attack, 14 defense, and 15 stamina. Now, it was brought up a couple of videos ago where a commenter had talked to me about a resource that shows different IV combinations and all kinds of things to get a max stat product. Notice that this exact IV combination at that level will yield you 1497, but I chose this particular IV combination because it's actually going to give you the most stat product, period, for Altaria. So I think that that's probably the best route to go. Being that it really sets you up to get the most that you possibly can out of your particular Pokemon. Now, Altaria actually ranks 6th in bulk and 5th in stat product across all participants in the Tempest Cup. So you got to imagine, out of 160 Pokemon, that's pretty freaking good. 6th in bulk is nothing to laugh at, only being 5 places behind Steelix, who is the #1 spot. 5th in stat product. And all of the Pokemon that have higher stat products, they don't necessarily have an advantage over Altaria. It's literally Altaria's package in terms of moves, which we'll get into, and its resistances and weaknesses and its typing. All of that really just sets it up to be a really high contender for any Great League team. Specifically in the Tempest Cup, though, it does have a really solid place in the meta. Now, you do receive an 86.8% potential, which is really good. That means that Altaria is getting over 85% of its potential stats being shown into this league. Now, let's move on to moves here. So, seeing that we are dragon and flying, I do have dragon and flying moves here color-coded for stab effect. Now, we do have Dragon Breath and Peck as our 2 fast moves, and Dragon Breath is definitely the one that you want to go with here. So, Dragon Breath gaining 3 energy per turn with 4 damage per turn. Peck actually doing 2.5 energy per turn and 3 damage per turn. The only reason that I could see you really go for Peck is if you already had another dragon attacker on your team, which I can't think of any off the top of my head. Charizard doesn't have a dragon fast move, does he? I guess you could technically have Dragonite. He does fit into the league. But either way, I don't really foresee there being a use for Peck, especially in this league. If there was a league where flying type moves are just godlike, I could see maybe Peck being chosen over Dragon Breath. But in this particular situation, Dragon Breath does make a lot more sense. Now, in terms of our charge moves, we do have Dazzling Gleam, which is a fairy type move, and I think that's just homage to the fact that Altaria in its mega form also gains dragon and fairy typing, which, you know, interesting. Dazzling Gleam definitely has a spot. I don't think it has near as much usage in this meta, and we'll get over to that in just a second. Dazzling Gleam costing 70 energy, doing 110 damage at 1.57 damage per energy. We also have Dragon Pulse, which costs 60 energy, doing 90 damage for a 1.50 damage per energy ratio. And last but not least, we do have Sky Attack, which costs 40, does 80 damage for a 1.78 damage per energy. The reason that Altaria is doing so well in this cup is there's almost like a little rock, paper, scissors type deal inside of the meta. There's 3 flying types that are really talked about a lot, and that being Altaria, Skarmory, and Charizard. Now, I did look considerably into Charizard quite a bit because I was thinking, well, I'd like to run a Charizard just because I think Charizard's a cool Pokemon. He's definitely overrated, but that's a topic for another video. I do think that Charizard would be a good addition to what my current team looks like, which I haven't, showed anybody yet, but Charizard would be cool, but I don't have one that has Blast Burn. and I was pulling numbers and stuff like that, while Charizard does actually beat Skarmory, Skarmory actually beats Altaria, and Altaria actually beats Charizard. So it's kind of like this little wheel that they have going on in between them. We may do just an entire video on Charizard at this point. Anyways, I feel like that was complete rambling. In terms of moveset that I think is probably the best one to go with, I did some matchups on pvpoke.com. I highly encourage you to take a Pokemon, fill out some information for that Pokemon. Just, you can basically do moves, and that's all you really have to do. If you want to drill down further, of course it does give you that option, but you can go on to pvpoke.com, do a multi-battle of all the Tempest Cup Pokemon, and figure out where your Pokemon actually wins and loses against the matchups. Now, with moveset, if you actually have Dragon Breath, Sky Attack, and Dragon Pulse, you're actually going to be winning 64.4% of your matchups. And that's big. So 64%. Just because I accidentally ran the numbers the wrong way. If we're not talking about the Tempest Cup, just in Great League in general, it's like over 75% of your matchups are won with these two moves. That's insane. If you do decide to go with Dazzling Gleam over Dragon Pulse, I can't honestly think of anything that would really warrant me having Dazzling Gleam over Dragon Pulse. Dazzling Gleam costs more. It does have a little bit better efficiency, but the fact that it costs 10 energy more and we're only doing 3 energy per turn kind of sets you up for 4 extra turns, which is 2 full seconds before you can even fire it, before you could fire Dragon Pulse. Anyways, if you were to go with Dragon Breath, Dazzling Gleam, and Sky Attack, you would actually only win 64.4% of your matchups. So I definitely think having Dragon Breath, Sky Attack, and Dragon Pulse are the preferred moves here. The fact that you do have Stab on all of those as well really does set you up for a nice little package here. Now, in all of our deep dive glory, let's quickly go over some positives and negatives. Of course, we're going to start with the negatives first. And honestly, the only negative thing that I could think for Altaria in this cup is the fact that it's quad weak to ice. So you are going to have a lot of trouble whenever it comes to ice-type Pokemon. Like Legacy Lapras is going to be an issue. Whiscash can be a little bit of an issue. Just any Pokemon that really focuses on having ice as either their main attacking power or their backup attack, it's really going to cause Altaria a lot of trouble. Now, on to the positive sides, we actually have some really great resistances here. So I have down that fire, grass, water, and ground are all resisted from Altaria. I think there's more, but those are the ones that are important in this meta to me. Fire, because you're going to be able to resist the Charizard. Grass, you're going to be able to resist Razor Leaf. Water, you're going to be able to resist Surf. And ground, you're going to be able to resist Mudshot. So you're resisting a lot of different stuff that's going on inside this meta that really puts Altaria up on a pedestal that is really hard to shake him off of. Our next positive thing is actually it's quite a fairly cheap investment for an Altaria. Even though you do have like a pretty high level that you're achieving, it's not going to cost you that much, especially if you go outside. Swablu itself is a normal and flying type Pokemon, so in partly cloudy weather you should see a fair bit amount of Swablus spawning. The fact that they're going to be boosted means that you can find them at the right level, at least around it. I honestly found a Swablu that was perfect as soon as I evolved it, and then I powered it up one time. It hit 1500 on the mark. So, being that it doesn't cost a whole lot to at least obtain a Swablu, and then on top of that, it only costs 10,000 Stardust and 25 candies for the second move. To unlock either Dragon Pulse or Sky Attack, it costs you 10,000 Stardust. I just released a video back on Monday talking about the cheap budget team that I would personally invest in if I was going to be going super budget this month. And Altaria makes a list bar none. It's the first Pokemon that I chose, and I wouldn't choose any other Pokemon other than Altaria to be the first one on that budget team. It's a budget Pokemon that performs very well. It outperforms like 90% of the meta. That's crazy. It's so good. Now, as far as matchups go, we actually do have an interesting situation here. So I did take the top 10 Pokemon, not including Altaria, and put it up against those for our matchups here. So we actually do end up losing to Steelix, Dugong, Regice, Lapras, Skarmory, and Mantine. So you can kind of see a trend there that Steelix just has a lot more bulk, and it does have access to Dragon-type moves, which are going to be super effective to Altaria here. So it does have an ability to end up doing more damage than Altaria can end up taking. Dugong is an Ice type, Regice is an Ice type, Lapras is an Ice type. All those are pretty self-explanatory there, being quad weak to Ice. Then we do have Skarmory, which we just don't have a lot that we can hit Skarmory with here. Skarmory actually ends up resisting so much of our damage that Skarmory can just output more to us than we can to it. Then we actually have Mantine, which Mantine being a super bulky Pokemon as is, and it having access to an Ice-type move, really sets up Altaria in a bad position there. And something that you do need to remember is all of those matchups, all of the matchups that I do in these videos are all 0 shields on both sides, just pure raw. If it was down to the last 2 Pokemon and you had no shields, straight up 1v1, Altaria would lose to those 6 Pokemon. Now, which ones do we actually win against? So the important one here is that we actually win against Tropius. Tropius, like we've talked about in a previous video, is a really big contender for the Tempest Cup. And I think Tropius, while he's not going to be in every person's team because he is so much harder to get in a lot of areas, he is going to be a threat that you should not sleep on. You need to kind of prepare for it, because if you come up against one, he's just going to be able to do a lot of damage to you. So, having access to Sky Attack is really what puts us in a favorable matchup for Tropius. If you, for some reason, just literally wanted to build Altaria to be a Tropius killer, you could go with Peck instead of Dragon Breath, but I really think Dragon Breath gets you to Sky Attack that much faster, and doing that much more damage will end up being better in most scenarios. We also do actually win against Jumpluff, Claydol, and Lantern. Lantern is an interesting one because being that we're Flying type, we should be weak to Electric, but the Dragon typing ends up bringing a resistance to that. So the fact that we're actually going to resist the Electric moves that Lantern brings, we're actually going to be resisting the Water moves that Lantern brings. It puts us in a better matchup for Lantern than most Pokemon actually have. So, in this little package here, you actually have an amazing Pokemon. I highly, highly encourage everyone to go get an Altaria. It is a big candy cost to get an Altaria off the bat, but once you get it, it's fairly cheap from that point. And I think that it's definitely worth it. It's 100% worth it to put Altaria on your team. He's good as... I don't know that I would lead with him because he has a quad weakness to Ice, but I would definitely have him as a mid that kind of controls what your opponent ends up throwing out. I think that that's probably the best place for Altaria. You can lead with him considering that he has a few resistances, but if they lead with something like a Lapras that has access to legacy moves, then you're going to be kind of screwed. So that's just my take, guys. Highly encourage you guys to let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And always remember, if you have a Pokemon that you are looking for a deep dive on, please let me know down in the comments below. I do need to stress that these are recorded days in advance. So if I don't get to your Pokemon the day after you comment it, it's not because I'm ignoring you. I just literally have days in advance before I can get to them. So thank you guys so much for the comments. I really do appreciate them. Everybody that's been encouraging me so far to keep doing these deep dives, I really do appreciate it. These are really fun and I really do enjoy doing them. So if you like to like videos, make sure you do that. If you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in those comments below. And until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.